All right. Welcome, everybody. February 3rd, 2023. So that means it's, wait, 2323. Somebody probably already knew that. All right. So we're going to start with some period of meditation. I'm going to give some guidance, and my microphone setup got a little changed because I was on a podcast and the host was asking me to be louder, and then he was like, "Now you're too loud." So let me know if you're having any problems hearing me. All right, settling into meditation posture, preferably an upright one, but you can also meditate lying down if your body needs that or prefers that. And you can close your eyes or just lower your gaze. You're beginning to turn the attention inward. And feeling how you're holding your body in terms of the posture, whether you are balanced, and also if you're holding it with tension or in an easeful and relaxed way. And having a sense of releasing and softening through the body. I often use a kind of felt image, if there could be such a thing, of everything in my body moving downward, kind of like draining out any stress or tension, just releasing. So this also gives a sense of being very grounded, very stable. Feeling the breath moving in the body. So the breath is quite obvious in certain parts of the body, like the chest, the abdomen. You might also notice that your shoulders move with the breath. You can feel the breath in the back as the diaphragm expands and contracts. Of course, you can feel the breath at the nostrils, down through the throat. And just letting that awareness be a kind of soothing energy. Breathing with ease. And noticing more subtle felt experience, the present moment mood as felt in the body. What is the mood or the energy you're bringing to this meditation? You know, our meditation is affected by the kind of day we're having, the quality of concerns you're caught in or absorbed by. If we're fatigued or anxious. And as we sit, all of this can often change, even as we're meditating, going from being tense or anxious to being calm, relaxed. Meditation helps us to see the impermanent nature of our mind, body states so that we can be less attached to them, less concerned by them. Just allow, just be with, breathe with. And we can then start to pay closer attention to the sensations of breath, to increase the one-pointedness, paying attention to the in-breath and the out-breath. And follow the breath at the nostrils or the belly. But here we're trying to get closer in so that we can really feel the details of experience, details of sensation. Even as we focus in this way, the mind can still be busy or pull us away into thoughts, proliferation. So our practice, at least initially, is largely about coming back, just bringing the attention back to the breath. And the mind wanders. There's no need to be disturbed by the wandering mind. It's perfectly natural. So a significant part of getting comfortable in meditation is letting go of impatience or judgment, frustration with that busyness of mind that doesn't want to quiet down when we're trying to settle. The less we fight with that, though, ironically, it's the more quickly it will naturally settle down. right. I hope you don't mind my leaving it quiet there for the second half of the sit. I just always feel like I don't want to just be in people's ears the whole time. Sometimes. So, as I mentioned, I'm going through a lot of looking through a lot of resources for this course, and so that's really interesting. It's one of the real benefits of teaching meditation is getting you to study, and sort of delving into things maybe more deeply because you feel a responsibility to be able to communicate them. And so I came upon something really just by accident. It wasn't even quite part of, not part of what I would offer in the Living Kindness course, but that's an essay from Bhikkhu Bodhi in a collection that was published when he it says compiled by the Buddhist Publication Society to celebrate his 70th birthday. And that was 2016. So we can take it that Bhikkhu Bodhi is at least 76 or 77, maybe older. And it's just called Dhamma Reflections, the book. And there were articles that he wrote for, or essays that he wrote for the Buddhist Publication Society, like they had a journal. That Buddhist Publication Society is in Sri Lanka, and Bhikkhu Bodhi was the editor for them for a long time. So it says the essays come from the Buddhist Publication Society newsletter. He became the editor in 1984, a position he held for 18 years. So I'll just put Bhikkhu Bodhi's name in here for those who are not familiar with him. He's an American monk who was translated a lot of the early Buddhist teachings. And this book is just called Dhamma Reflections. So, okay, so this is number 8, and it's called Purification of Mind. And it's about just a little over 2 pages long, so not really long, but I'll probably stop and comment as I go along. And if you're not familiar with his writing, he has a very you'll see he has a very distinct style, let's say. It's something almost academic, I suppose. It's a very high kind of language. Okay, Purification of Mind. An ancient maxim found in the Dhammapada sums up the practice of the Buddhist teaching in 3 simple guidelines to training, namely, to abstain from all evil, to cultivate good, and to purify one's mind. These 3 guidelines form a graded sequence of steps that progress from the outward and preparatory to the inward and essential. So I'll just say that, keep in mind as you're listening to this, how this can relate to recovery or to addiction, because I think you'll see that it's, as usual, like there's a through line that's very connected. So from the outward and preparatory to the inward and essential. Each step leads naturally into the one that follows it. And the culmination of the 3, purification of mind, makes it plain that the heart of Buddhist practice is to be found here. Purification of mind, as understood in the Buddhist teachings, is the sustained endeavor to cleanse the mind of defilements, those dark, unwholesome mental forces that run beneath the surface stream of consciousness vitiating our thinking, values, attitudes, and actions. The chief among the defilements are the three that the Buddha has termed the roots of evil: greed, hatred, and delusion. From these emerge their numerous offshoots and variants: anger and cruelty, avarice and envy, conceit and arrogance, hypocrisy and vanity, all the multitude of erroneous views. I just love the way he writes, just so intense, you know. Contemporary attitudes do not look favorably upon such notions as defilement and purity, and on first encounter, they may strike us as throwbacks to an outdated moralism, valid perhaps in an era when prudery and taboo were dominant, but having no claims upon us emancipated torchbearers of modernity. So in other places, he's of my generation and, came out of like the hippie, free love, break all the rules kind of culture. And so he's definitely sort of attuned to that. Admittedly, we do not all wallow in the mire of gross materialism, and many of us seek our enlightenments and spiritual highs. Here's something coming here. But we want them on our own terms. And as the heirs of the new freedom, we believe they are to be won through an unbridled quest for experience without any special need for introspection, personal change, or self-control. Does this sound like an addict at all? Like, I really want to become enlightened and have a spiritual path, but like, don't tell me what to do. I just want to do it my way. And this works. Smoke a little of this, drop a couple of them. Unbridled quest for experience without any special need for introspection, personal change, or self-control. However, in the Buddha's teaching, the criterion of genuine enlightenment lies precisely in purity of mind. The purpose of all insight and enlightened understanding is to liberate the mind from the defilements. And nibbana itself, nibbana is the Pali for nirvana, the goal of the teaching is defined quite clearly as freedom from greed, hatred, and delusion. From the perspective of the Dhamma, defilement and purity are not mere postulates of a rigid authoritarian moralism, but real and solid facts essential to a correct understanding of the human situation in the world. So again, this strikes me as very much like, in addiction and recovery, that kind of, I can do what I want to do, and it's, everything is relative, or, don't come down on me with your moral rules, but you're saying it's not about that. It's real. It's very real, which is like what we discover as in recovery as well, right? That things that we may have thought of as kind of repressive or, moralistic turn out to be like, oh, that's a good guidelines for living in a practical and real way. As facts of lived experience, defilement and purity pose a vital distinction, having a crucial significance for those who seek deliverance from suffering. They represent the 2 points between which the path to liberation unfolds. The former, its problematic and starting point, defilement. The latter, purity, its resolution and end. The defilements, the Buddha declares, lie at the bottom of all human suffering, burning within as lust and craving, as rage and resentment. They lay waste to hearts, lives, hopes, and civilizations, and drive us blind and thirsty to the round of birth and death. I like that he connects this from the personal into the universal. They lay waste to hearts and civilizations. The Buddha describes the defilements as bonds, fetters, hindrances, and knots. Thence the path to unbonding, release, and liberation, to untying the knots, is at the same time a discipline aimed at inward cleansing. The work of purification must be undertaken in the same place where the defilements arise, in the mind itself. And the main method the Dhamma offers for purifying the mind is meditation. Meditation in the Buddhist training is neither a quest for self-effusive ecstasies, nor a technique of home-applied psychotherapy, but a carefully devised method of mental development, theoretically precise and practically efficient for attaining inner purity and spiritual freedom. We got to go over this one again. So meditation is not, it's neither a quest for self-effusive ecstasies. So presumably meaning, a way to like get yourself high, as he said, kind of, yeah, which, as we know, like that was, again, I feel like he's sort of speaking to my generation, like when we first encountered meditation in the late 60s, early 70s, it was kind of presented as this free high, the kind of be here now, go to India and like find a guru. But then it's also interesting that he says, nor a technique of home applied psychotherapy. So it's also not like trying to do therapy on ourselves, right? Which is another way that sometimes it can be used. The principal tools of Buddhist meditation are the core wholesome mental factors of energy, mindfulness, concentration, and understanding. So those are 4 factors of the Eightfold Path: energy or effort, mindfulness, concentration, and then understanding would refer to right view. But in the systematic practice of meditation, these are strengthened and yoked together in a program of self-purification, which aims at extirpating the defilements root and branch, so that not even the subtlest unwholesome stirrings remain. I was meaning to Google the word extirpate. I have heard the word, but I'm only in the context do I understand that it must mean, because it says aims to extirpate the defilements root and branch. So presumably it means to dig up. So the systematic practice of meditation, but in the practice of meditation, these qualities of energy, mindfulness, concentration, understanding are strengthened and come together in a program of self-purification, which is meant to uproot the defilements. Since all defiled states of consciousness are born from ignorance, the most deeply embedded defilement, the final and ultimate purification of mind, is to be accomplished through the instrumentality of wisdom, the knowledge and vision of things as they really are. Wisdom, however, does not arise through chance or random good intentions, but only in a purified mind. Thus, in order for wisdom to come forth and accomplish the ultimate purification through the eradication of defilements, we first have to create a space for it by developing a provisional purification of mind, a purification which, though temporary and vulnerable, is still indispensable as a foundation for the emergence of all liberative insight. So what I find encouraging about this is that he's setting up this ultimate, like, you're gonna extirpate all your, the defilements, right? You're going to get rid of all of them eventually. But he's saying, in the meantime, before that happens, you can actually, get to a space where you kind of have moments where you're letting go, which is what, we all experience from time to time in our meditation. So just to go over that again, we create a space for that eradication of defilements by developing a pure provisional purification of mind. So in other words, sometimes our mind is purified and sometimes it's not. Though temporary and vulnerable, it's still indispensable. It's kind of like, the gradual path. We can't expect to just be enlightened the first time we meditate. One more paragraph. The achievement of this preparatory purification of mind begins with the challenge of self-understanding. To eliminate defilements, we must first learn to know them, to detect them at work infiltrating and dominating our everyday thoughts and lives. That just sounds to me like inventory, right? It's very much speaking to the issue of inventory that we do in the 12 steps. For countless eons, we have acted on the spur of greed, hatred, and delusion, and thus the work of self-purification cannot be executed hastily in obedience to our demand for quick results. The task requires patience, care, and persistence, and the Buddha's crystal clear instructions. For every defilement, the Buddha, in his compassion, has given us the antidote, the method to emerge from it and vanquish it. By learning these principles and applying them properly, we can gradually wear away the most stubborn inner stains and reach the end of suffering, the taintless liberation of the mind. So I just was struck by what a powerful and beautiful and rich essay that is. Purification of mind. And what it comes down to is not complicated, right? And it's interesting that at the end is when he tells us where we have to start. To eliminate defilements, we must first learn to know them, to detect them at work infiltrating and dominating our everyday thoughts and lives. So this is the idea of our practice, right? It's where we start. Like, oh, we sit down to meditate. It's like, and the first thing we see is like, I can't keep my attention on my breath. And very often people think, oh, I'm supposed to stop thinking I'm doing this wrong or it's not working for me. But this instruction suggests almost the opposite, which is you need to see those thoughts. Because if you're going to uproot them, if you're going to change, you have to see what's going on in the same way that we take an inventory. It's not like, oh, I did some bad stuff, but I don't want to think about it. It's like, no, like, let's address it. Let's like really look at it honestly and fully. And so in practice, to see these things and then, to understand that there are, these antidotes and, the ultimate antidote is wisdom. As he says, so all defiled states of consciousness are born from ignorance. And so the final and ultimate purification of mind is to be accomplished through the instrumentality of wisdom. So that's where we're trying to get to. But it's a process. I mean, we can get a certain amount of wisdom at any stage of practice, but typically, just for one example, we work with the 5 hindrances. We work with desire, aversion, sleepiness, restlessness, and doubt, and we try to find ways to let go of them or to weaken them, or at least to not be reactive to them. And so what do we do? How do we counteract craving? Okay, there's some classical instructions about sort of seeing the unsatisfactory nature of things that we crave. That is, yeah, I want that thing, but it's not really going to solve anything for me. And then there's the reflection on, so that's it's partly a reflection on impermanence, that, oh, well, I can get that, but it's not going to solve anything for me. So that's actually bringing in wisdom, right? The wisdom of seeing, oh, it's impermanent. Then there's the reflection on the suffering that, for instance, that anger brings me. Well, how do I let go of anger? Well, one of the ways is to see, oh, it's not giving me anything. It's causing me pain. So let me do something else with it. And so there are various things we can do with anger. Typically, the classic antidote is practice loving kindness. I also find that compassion can be a helpful antidote to anger, to think, oh, this person who is being a jerk is probably suffering themselves. That's why they're behaving in that way. So maybe I can have compassion for them instead of a judgment. So this is what Bhikkhu Bodhi is talking about, how we start to see these inner forms of, he calls them defilements, that's a fancy term for, the crap we have in our head, so we start to see that, and then we learn to dance with that, with them. We learn to respond to them differently, to not be driven by them, to not be controlled by them. And so this is the process that we're going through here, that we're trying to learn with meditation and indeed with recovery, because if you look at a 12-step or any other recovery program, it's going through a very similar path. It's seeing, we can call it the defilement or the addiction or whatever you want to call it, seeing the unskillful behavior, seeing the unskillful mental states, the cravings, seeing the things that lead us into suffering, and then finding alternative ways of responding to that. Now, in the 12-step world, a lot of it is more externalized in terms of, meetings and calling your sponsor, that sort of thing. But there's also a great deal of the inner work as well. The prayer work is really, similar to the meditative work. When step 7 says we humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings. Well, as I quote Buddhadasa, when we're praying like that, what we're really doing is trying to activate the law of karma to change things, to let go. We beseech the law of karma through our actions, not merely with words. And that means the law of karma is operating on the mind, on speech, and on behavior. And so it's once again really about doing this work, starting with the inner work and then external work. And I would say, the one way that Buddhism and the 12 steps kind of are different is that Buddhism, we think of it largely as starting internally, whereas with 12-step work and recovery work, we're thinking of it more as starting externally. But those are really false distinctions to a great extent, because they're both really operating on all levels, on mind, body, and on mind and body and speech. So I hope that was helpful. I found it really intriguing to myself and and helpful. So I share that with you, and love to hear if there are any thoughts, questions, reflections. See, I always assume that as you're listening to me, you're also thinking, because that's what we do. So I'd be interested to hear any of those thoughts. Julia.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Julia. A lot of this hit home with me. I've had a lot of changes since, shortly before I got sober in my life. And I see my children impacted also. And I get really angry about things I cannot control, like almost kind of a rage. Like I could just get a punching bag and punch it or, just keep walking and walk for many miles. And I think a lot of that is, having compassion for those that, kind of create that chaos, and acceptance. And I really do think that, wisdom is, the solution, and learning how to not react to things in life that we can't control. It's always something. And, my family's not unique. There's many people that are going through lots of changes. And I tend to I used to drink, of course, that's why I'm here. And I've been sober 2.5 years this time. And I prefer not to drink. I'm a lot happier, and I can see things clearly when I'm not drinking, like what I do. And the meditation just kind of helps me to focus on, what I need to change, and just to be quiet and not to spin out with my, thoughts. And it's been a habit since early childhood. I was always focused on things that I couldn't control, and worried about other people, and just, I would spin out in my head. And so it feels really good just to kind of be sober and learn new ways to go about life, and enjoy life more. I really do enjoy being sober, even though the feelings are kind of intense. And sometimes I'm like, I don't quite know what to do with them. So I want to eat, like, it's, eating is my latest thing. And,
Sure.
So anyways, really good topics. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah. Thanks, Julia. Yeah. Well, I mean, as soon as my wife left, I went to the grocery store, got some of the things that are traditionally not kept in the house. So there's a pint of Ben & Jerry's in the refrigerator. There's a bag of pretzels in the cabinet. Little, just, they're not eating them all at once. Moderation, but nonetheless, yeah, and I will say, I appreciate you just, talking about meditation in the way you did, and because I wasn't really kind of giving just the importance of it as something to like quell our energy a little bit, just because even to get to a place where there's wisdom, or where you're able to see things clearly, generally we have to settle down a bit, and anyway, it just has that benefit for sure. And Bhikkhu Bodhi talks about how concentration cools the emotions. And meditation, when we do enough meditation, it just modulates things in a positive direction. So really, that's probably the number one purpose to meditate for most of us, and then all the rest of it. Jeb, hi.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for this. I was thinking during your reading, and this is kind of based on something that I saw earlier in some other thing that I was looking at. But so sort of listening for in this reading, it sounded a little like, we're talking about the purification of the mind. It sounded a little bit striving, like we have to sort of strive for it. Whereas what I was, I've heard many times, but I most recently did hear that our mind is pure. We have the mind is pure, right? So it's about, I don't know, it just sounded like there was some striving in there. And if we strive, then we're going to get purification.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just wondering.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's a really good point. And it's very much the kind of thrust of, a Theravadan monastic teaching. It's going to have a strong effort component to it. Yeah, and I think there's first of all, I would say that from the viewpoint of someone like Bhikkhu Bodhi, it's the striving is not personal or ego driven or egoistic. But nonetheless, for an ordinary people like us, it's easy to get caught in an idea that, oh, it sounds like I'm supposed to do more. And then, yeah, there's this sort of conflict that arises in there, because certainly if we are striving to attain something in our meditation, that's typically a kind of energy that's really counterproductive. And so it really that's a thing that I point to a lot in my teaching, is how to make an effort without it being striving, and it requires real care. And I think that's why, we talk about, having a loving awareness, or, mindfulness that's infused with loving kindness, so that it's not judgmental. It's because if all we're doing is observing the mind and then comparing it to what we think it's supposed to be, there's always going to be this conflict. But there absolutely needs to have this attitude of kindness toward ourselves. As to whether, what you described as our mind is already pure is kind of, I would say that that's sort of more of a Mahayana view versus a Theravada view. So, it's kind of the Mahayana idea of Buddha nature, that we have Buddha nature, or that we are intrinsically pure. That I think it. And it's really just a way of talking. It's not really describing two different things, but I think a Theravada view would be more that when we let go of the defilements or the hindrances or whatever, is in the way, that then, yes, the mind is pure, I mean, that's because it's what it's saying. It's purifying the mind. But as you say, no, I mean, it's a different language, because, right, he's not talking about a mind that's intrinsically pure. He's talking about cleaning out all this stuff. But we could infer from that if we're getting rid of the defilements, that then we arrive at a purified mind, that the underlying mind is pure. So it's really just sort of it's a distinction of sort of approaches, and using language. And my view is that you should use the approach that you find most beneficial, not to get caught too much in, oh, well, this person says it's this way, or that person says that way. It's like, well, what resonates for you, and work with that. All of these things are just concepts anyway. They aren't realities. There are no, there's just words describing things. And so there's many different ways to describe them. So thank you for that observation. It's very helpful. And there's always this question of balance in the teachings, and understanding the teachings, and in effort. Certainly when you read a lot of the Pali canon and the discourses, the early Buddhism, there is a lot of striving. I mean, if you look at how the Buddha, his own path was really rigorous, but then he decided like that was too much, and he dialed it back. But when you look at what he considers to be dialed back compared to like how I practice, it's like for him, like having one meal a day was like, oh yeah, that's really good, because you don't want to spend too much time eating and, eat too much. And so one meal a day is good. That's much better than not eating, or having like 1 grain of rice a day, like I was doing before. So it's like, okay, for you, 1 meal a day, maybe not for me. So always a challenge to find that balance. So I thank you all for showing up on a Friday night. We'll be here. I'll be here next Tuesday morning, and then next Friday evening will be the Spirit Rock Zoom class, because it'll be the second Friday of the month. So if you come looking for me next Friday and you're sitting and nobody's letting you in the waiting room, you might be in the wrong waiting room. So it's always good. You can, on the front page of my website, I have both the link to both this class and the Spirit Rock class. So you can kind of click on there, and I think you'll find your way. So yeah, again, thank you all for coming. And I've for a while there, I was adding a little like suggestion of practice at the end of each class. So I'm trying to think, what's the suggestion for practice? I'm afraid to say purification of mind now, but let's say I would suggest this first idea that the Buddha says, to eliminate defilements, we must first learn to know them, to detect them at work infiltrating and dominating our everyday thoughts and lives. So just to let this be a practice. I mean, it's probably already something you guys do. It's something I try to do. Just be aware when those unhelpful thoughts are coming in, and seeing if you can let go and find a different way to guide your attention in that moment, whether it's to loving kindness or to letting go, or to connection with others. So take care of yourselves. We in the Northern Hemisphere are definitely getting knocked around, and we have to take care. So be safe, and I'll see you on Tuesday. Oh, I know what I forgot to say. On Sunday, if you're in the Bay Area, please come to the book passage at the Ferry Building at 3:30 p.m. I will be doing a book event with Eugene Cash about living kindness. So Ferry Building, 3:30 Sunday. And everybody from Wisconsin and Vermont, I want you all to fly out here. The weather will be better than it is there. It won't be great, but it'll be better. Poor Hans. I mean, it's really going to kill you guys this week. That, according to the New York Times, it's going to be like 50 below wind chill. So
yeah, it's negative 20 without wind chill right now. So.
Yeah. I told you I lived in Vermont for a couple of years, so I experienced that step outside and the nose hairs freeze experience, but so yeah, good. Keep the heat on. All right, everybody. Peace.